2 years ago, in the summer of 2021, the Spain branch of Jehovah's Witnesses, officially known as Jehovah's Christian Witnesses of Spain, launched a lawsuit against a small number of ex-members who had registered an association called the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses. The Spain branch claimed that the name of the association attacked the reputation of Jehovah's Witnesses and demanded that the association be disbanded and fined. However, their attempt to silence these victims of the Watchtower religion backfired in a big way. In mid-December of 2023, the Spanish court ruled in favor of the defendant association and against the plaintiff religion of Jehovah's Witnesses in a 74-page sentence. An unexpected outcome of this ruling was that the court found that the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses constitutes a dangerous cult. As a result, on December 18, 2023, the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses held a press conference. This press conference reveals shocking things about the policies and practices of Jehovah's Witnesses in Spain that the world needs to know about. In order to inform the English-speaking public, I've translated key excerpts of this press conference and produced an English voiceover track. We'll begin with the testimony of Enrique Carmona, one of the founders of the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses. I would like to introduce us to you. I do not remember the names of the two people accompanying my colleague, Florentine and Alejandra, office colleagues of Carlos Bardavillo. In order, Florentine and Alejandra are colleagues who have helped us in the hearings of the trial against our association. You already know our colleague Isabel Flores from the news reports. He will be discussing our plans for the future, and I'll take care of the preamble, which you more or less all know already. First off is to let you know how this association came into being. It was born out of an existing WhatsApp group. Just a few people chatting with one another and licking their wounds. We really wanted the people of Spain to know the truth about the image that the officially registered religious organization of Jehovah's Witnesses projects. This image that they project is totally false. Should you become a member of the organization and then change your mind, perhaps you don't like something about them and you want to leave. This is what always happens when you start to disagree. What we've experienced when we left has been very damaging, clearly. So, those of us who have come out have every reason in the world to call ourselves victims. On many occasions, I have stated that they are in fact in violation of the law. It is clear that they do not let a member enjoy the freedom to join another religion. For example, this should be something that is indisputably permissible, but it's not allowed. They won't let you leave, and they won't leave you alone. They show this by their internal rules, written rules, as well as in their videos. They have shown us how we are to be treated. And that treatment is very harmful, very, very painful. So we were chatting in the WhatsApp group about this issue, and someone came up with the bright idea that if we formed an association, then we could be heard by society at large. While society can be reached in many ways, forming an association opens certain doors to be able to reach the ones we really want to reach. We're talking about official doors, officials who can help regulate their behavior. We don't want the religious organization to disappear, but we do want them to be integrated into the community in a democratic way, correctly, according to modern-day values. So we created an association. We created its corresponding bylaws and registered it on the National Registry of Associations, and we began pursuing our goals modestly. Then one day in 2021, I believe it was around May or June, we were served with several lawsuits. We were being sued because of the name of our association, which was considered to be inappropriate and damaging to their reputation. I was perplexed. The papers were served on my associate, Israel, because the association headquarters are registered at his home address. We were all perplexed because this is not normal. It's not normal for a religious organization to sue its ex-members. Nobody does that. And as an example, we can even point to the Catholic Church, which has been served multiple abuse lawsuits and the like, but they have never turned around and sued anyone. How is it that an organization that we thought was Christian will not turn the other cheek? Instead, they decided to use the law courts of the land. We immediately had to contact a specialist in these matters, Carlos Bardavillo. We had met him at the presentation in Zaragoza, where we introduced ourselves and our association. When the lawsuit was served, the first thing I did was to contact Carlos to tell him what has happened to us. And then Carlos started to work, and we started collaborating, providing him with the necessary evidence, the necessary testimonies in as fast a way as we could, because Jehovah's Witnesses had had all the time in the world to prepare their lawsuit and their strategy, but we had only 20 days to respond. Even so, our response was excellent. 20 days. And even after the 21st day had passed, when we could no longer make submissions, we continued to receive documents about more and more lawsuits and experiences of people from Spain and from outside of Spain. It was overwhelming. How can it be said that there are no victims? How can there not be any victims? There are many, many victims, so very many. We had already made calculations previously in 2021 through to 2022, and we estimated that there were approximately 1.8 million victims worldwide. In other words, we're not talking about some minor issue here. What has happened is that they have kept the victims hidden and threatened. Look, there are a lot of victims that we call PIMOs. For the press media who are not used to our slang, that is an acronym that stands for physically in, mentally out. Physically, they are seen to be in the organization, but mentally, they are out. Members are not free to leave because they have families and loved ones that they would have to leave behind. All family bonds are cut off, eliminated, when someone leaves. Once an announcement is made that a member of the congregation is no longer a Jehovah's Witness, well, that's it. They become the first victim. Shunning means that when they see you on the street, be it your cousin, your father, or your mother, they look the other way. This is the reality. Oh, they say it's a personal matter. Sure it is, to a point. We don't deny that. But is it the individual who's acting that way, or the one who makes him do it? It is the religious entity that obliges its members to act that way, and they admit that. This obligation to shun is stated in their publications and in their videos. And well, you all know how it goes, especially those of you who are witnesses and know what is going on in there. So, there were 5 trial sessions. They were really long, 7 hours and more, with only small 10-minute breaks just to go to the restroom. And there I was with my diabetes. Not being able to eat was bad for me, but I had to do it for 7 hours. By day 2, I was prepared with my yogurt and stuff. But what I mean to say is that it was very hard to be there for 7 hours listening to the first 2 sessions, listening to nonsense and lies, for real, nonsense and lies. From the organization's top press representative down to the most basic publisher, lies and twisting of the truth, and so on. But then came the next 2 sessions. Sorry, there were 3 sessions after that. All we did was weep, crying. We listened to the victims, and there wasn't a dry eye in the court except for them, for Jehovah's Witnesses. For Jehovah's Witnesses, we are all satanic apostates. There we were, really listening to victims in the courtroom and by video conference telling their painful stories. And their pain was so great, everyone wept, except for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Even the judge had to restrain herself, but she was clearly affected. As for her clerk, tears were falling from her eyes, and from our team as well, and from the observers that were present in the room. There were only a few of us, and we wept. Then came the time when the judge said she was ready to rule. She gave an approximate date as to when to expect her ruling, and it came and went. She first said that by March, or May latest, but the days passed, with no sentence being handed down, and our anxiety grew. We felt a lot of anxiety because the ruling was going to be very important for all of us. There came a moment when I consoled myself saying, "Stop worrying, it will come when it comes." And it came when I least expected it. Like everyone who gets a ruling, I jumped to the end, and when I saw this, that we had been absolved of everything, I could not contain my joy. I got goosebumps. It was late. We'd already been talking about the thing for 2 hours, but it was exciting. And now what? And now, what are we going to do in the future? Well, first, get the word out to the media, because one of the objectives of our association is to inform society in general about the unacceptable behavior of this religious organization. We do this because we don't want people to be deceived. They need to be aware of what's going on, because they don't tell anyone about this shunning of theirs. If they touch on it, it's only to tiptoe around the topic in a Bible study. But the reality is very hard, and it has to be made known. This information has to be provided before a person makes a commitment through baptism. That is our obligation, to inform our society and to inform the public authorities to get help so that this organization corrects its behavior. If they won't, then the law will have to deal with them. But we don't want them to disappear. We do not want to make martyrs out of them. That would be the worst. What we do want is for them to conduct themselves fairly and democratically in accordance with the law, and to let people leave or enter into that religion without any problem or trauma. That means that they should immediately start publishing the same number of times they have published, that their members cannot talk to those disfellowshipped in any way. Now they must roll that back and say that they can treat their family and friends normally. It's okay if they want to avoid religious discussions, but as for everything else, well, life goes on. That is what we really are seeking, a standard of total equality between women and men, the normalization of sexual diversity. Because all of this, which is not in their area, their villa, their boat, all of this produces disfellowshipping, and with disfellowshipping comes shunning. Let them disfellowship people because they say they are no longer a Jehovah's Witness. Any club has the right to do that. But no one in any club tells their club members, "Hey, you can't talk to this guy anymore. This member who is related to you that we have expelled." Never. Not even in the Catholic Church, which is our point of reference. We are neither for nor against the Church, but it also has its own closed groups within. But not even in those cases does this happen. They do not stop talking to their relatives when they cease to belong to one of those groups. In other words, the church observes the law and allows people their freedom of choice. In a state governed by the rule of law, such as ours, there should be no organization that behaves this way. And that is what we now want to make the politicians aware of, so that our parliament, together with other associations such as Red UNE, that also act to defend human rights and who are against cults. So by this, we hope to achieve a realistic law on cults. For my part, I have finished. I give the floor to our president, Isabel Flores. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught to think of everyone outside of their religion as wicked, worldly people. They fail to realize that love is supposed to identify true Christians because true Christians imitate Christ, who is the perfect reflection of his Father, Jehovah, or if you prefer, Yahweh. And as the Apostle John describes Yahweh, whoever does not love has not come to know God, because God is love. 1 John 4:8. God is love. If we do not love, then we do not know God. Jesus tells us that the love of God is so powerful that it allows us to love even our enemies. He commands us to continue to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. Well, the Spanish Association of Victims is not persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses. Quite the other way round, wouldn't you say? Yet these Jehovah's Witnesses, who claim to be the only true Christians on earth, when faced with the testimony of one victim after another relating how they've suffered and what they've lost, can only sit there stone-faced, while everyone else, these so-called wicked worldly people, are moved to tears. Where is the compassion of the Christ? Evident in Jehovah's Witnesses. How could their hearts become so hardened in the face of such terrible pain and inhumane suffering? Next, we are going to hear from another member of the association, Isabel Flores, who is going to reveal something interesting that may suggest the motivation behind this failed lawsuit of Jehovah's Witnesses. After all, it seems odd that they would go to such expense and take such a public relations risk as to launch a lawsuit against people who already feel victimized if all they were concerned with was some name-calling. It seems there are other reasons, financial reasons, for the lawsuit. It should be noted that Jehovah's Witnesses are only 1 out of 8 officially recognized religions in Spain. But what does official recognition or religious registration mean in Spain? Let's listen in. Well, I want to thank everyone present, members of the press, as well as the victims that I'm seeing here. We, the few, represent many thousands of people with whom we can all identify. All the harm that they have done to us, all our suffering. We need to take strong measures. These measures are going to be backed up by this sentence, this ruling. Not just because I say it, or because the judge has ruled them to be a destructive cult due to the absolute control they exercise over their members. It's not just that. It is that in the ruling's 74 pages, there is a lot of content indicating that criminal offenses may be involved. The more technical part I'll leave to Carlos to address. I'm going to focus on our next steps, what we have to do, starting with informing the media. And I want to thank the press for being here today. We have to bring this to the attention of the Ministry of the Presidency, to Mr. Bolaños and other ministries like Social Security. Did I say Social Security? Yes, we will have to make it known that this suffering causes mental disorders. We are a very small association, yet we've already taken steps to be able to help these victims with medical treatment, with psychologists. But we are a small association. We do not receive subsidies. We have a link on our website for donations, but that's more or less how we are supporting ourselves. I have some sample cases that I can present to you if they would allow me to do so, where we have managed to literally save their lives. We have succeeded in preventing people from committing suicide. Many come with a self-destructive tendency, but thanks to this association and other similar groups that we have here in Spain and at the international level, many times these suicides have been prevented. This shunning, this social death, causes a lot of pain. Pain from the realization that your family won't talk to you, that your childhood friends won't talk to you, that you've been trapped in a cage for decades while you thought you were free, but you weren't. You discover all that, and in addition, there are the ideologies that before seemed to you so credible. Beliefs that there was going to be a destruction, an Armageddon, a destruction so damaging that it would be a worldwide genocide. We can still count among our victims people who can't sleep at night, who wake up scared because of the biblical stories and the Watchtower publications painted with such terrifying images of how the flood was. People were drowning, children of tender age were dying. I have suffered myself because I was born into this religion. I taught it to my children. I taught the same to my 3 children that my parents taught me. I taught them those biblical stories. There were other images showing buildings collapsing, fire falling from the sky, people dying, cities shattered. Images like what we are seeing lately in these war zones were images that we already saw with our own eyes when we were 1 or 2 or 3 years old. This fear has been instilled deep in us, the fear of not wanting to lose one's life. They told us that we had to have the favor of Jehovah, that we had to have a good relationship with Jehovah, and if we didn't have that, that this was going to happen to us. It's like the stories that we were told as children, but these have much more force than those stories told by grandmothers to scare children into being good and going to bed and eating their food. These are much more dangerous. 25 years go by, and we must reap what we have sown in our children. And as you know, I reaped it yesterday. The mind of a child or an adolescent is very fragile. We all know that they are like sponges that absorb everything as they begin to form their personality. We have to train them to have a strong personality. This religion, which is legally recognized, has destroyed the lives of thousands of people, not only adults, but of young people, children, teenagers, and people who maybe have issues or problems adapting to their environment. If you're there, they teach you that you have to have a certain type of haircut. And if you don't have that haircut, if your hair is too long, they tell you that you will not have a good relationship with Jehovah. That means you are going to be destroyed. They won't even let you go to the platform to give a 5-minute Bible reading assignment. In other words, you are being marginalized. Your friends and everyone else sees you as someone who is not growing spiritually, as they say. Of course, you don't want that. You want to be accepted by the group, so you do whatever it takes. You wear a suit and tie when you're 8 years old so that you can go on the platform. The plus side of this is that we now have oratory skills that allow us to speak publicly with facility. And you will have noticed that you've been speaking with many of the victims, and they have been able to clearly explain their suffering. And that suffering comes most of the time from a young age, because most people don't convert to Jehovah's Witnesses. They are born into it. Very few people have been converted, and thank God that today that is the reality. People are wide awake. In fact, the problem concerns a minority here in Spain. We are talking about, among all the cults or coercive groups, a mere 1% of 46 billion. It is not a large group, but it is true that we are victims of this organization. As the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses, we are performing social work. Why do we have to take care of the evil that others do? Shouldn't they have to pay for the mental health treatments that are costing so many, from 50 to 100 euros per session? That's one session every week, over and over. Why don't they pay for it? They cause the need for it. I'm referring to the religious denomination of Jehovah's Witnesses here in Spain. That leadership, which has only been concerned with denouncing victims, people who are crying, people who are losing their loved ones, their family members, their friends, and sometimes even their life. And I'm talking about it myself. I've already lost 2 people, my sister in 2015 and my own son yesterday. Therefore, we have to petition the Ministry of the Presidency to reconsider this religion's official status. Because a jurist who went to testify at the trial, who was precisely at some point Carlos Bardavio's professor, that jurist testified that he had been one who had participated in giving them their official registration in 2006. And in answer to Carlos' question, "But did you read the book, Shepherding the Flock, the book used by elders with their protocols, and the book organized, books that explain their dogmas, protocols, and policies that are to be strictly followed in the congregations and that the elders are obliged to comply with? Books where they talk about those judicial committees that are so tough that you come out crying. We know that our lives may end right there, even if we are still alive, but it may be that from then on they will give us social death through these judicial committees, that we may already have the stigma of the rest of the congregation that they will not speak to us, that we lose all our previous life because of those committees." That's what these books contain. Well, the answer of this jurist is that he had approved their official registration because they were good people, but recognized that he had not read any Watchtower literature. Therefore, we have to bring this to the attention of the Ministry of the Presidency, Mr. Bolaños, Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Religious Freedoms. The official registration of a religious denomination is very important because thanks to it, they can achieve tax-free status for their land and buildings. Therefore, they have an economic benefit. On the one hand, they are causing an evil that we all have to pay for. Our association is often unable to afford it with so many mental health expenditures, but that problem that they generate, okay, they don't pay for it, but nevertheless, they do benefit from not paying taxes. Okay, thanks to having official status as a religion, they can earn millions of euros because they can go before any city council in Spain and present their deeds of incorporation signed by the board of directors that is in Ahilvir and request a free plot of land. And the city hall is obliged to give it to them. There are third-party lands. There is land that has been prepared precisely to be given to them as places of worship for Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, and Mormons. In other words, freedom of religion. It's a correct motive. In my opinion, it should be there. But that should be controlled. If there are victims, and it has already been demonstrated that with this ruling that there are, if they are not doing anything to change, but on top of that, they want to silence us because their basic option was to make us disappear as an association, though they have not succeeded. Well, what we have to ask for is that an investigation be mounted. And if the result is that they lose their official registration as a religion, then so be it. Then make them pay for all this national mental health disaster that they are creating. We know of victims in every province and community in Spain, and it's getting worse. The proof is that I have tried to save my son, and I have not been able to do so. Therefore, we are going to make a very strong statement at the ministry level, the Congress of Deputies. We are also going to work hand in hand with Red UNE and other organizations, in which 300,000 signatures have already been collected, and we are going to present them to Congress to call for a law against coercive persuasion. We cannot allow this in the 21st century, and with this wonderful constitution that we have in Spain, that there should be people hiding under the umbrella of freedom of worship who at the same time want to silence us and take away our freedom of expression and information. In fact, to the journalists who are here, the media present, know that they also want to silence all of you. And now they have been trying for some time to send notifications, rectifications, so that you can publish what they want, even though you may have contacted them. They have said no and so on, but then they want to make a rectification, and somehow they want to take steps to silence you as well. We have a world-famous journalist, which has also been sued several times already, so that he doesn't report on the suffering we are experiencing. Kiko Acedo, I mean, this is no joke. It is a very strong organization. We believe they have now been forced to, in all the congregations in Spain. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about money. This is a congregation, a very strong religious congregation that obliges the 1,400 congregations that exist in Spain to more or less give between 4 or 5 or 6 euros per publisher per month. Publishers are the active Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, that's about 110,000. So if we run some calculations, we'll get about 8 million euros or dollars per year. Call it what you will, but there's more. On the websites, people can also donate money with credit cards. When they go to the assemblies, we used to have some boxes where we used to put money in cash. Now they don't. Now they have kiosks where you can make your donation by credit card. They're making everything easy for people so that they can continue to take in cash, and they have even set a quota for them. It seems very little, 4 or 5 or 6 euros a month, but after 1 year we are talking about 8 million euros, and they take in even more. They move a lot of money. There is no economic transparency. They are not required to file tax reports with the state. But it is true that they move a lot of money, and they have a lot of power, especially to be harassing this association that is doing social work. That is why we are asking the ministry, we are going to formally request a meeting and convey all this information that I have given you, so that they can be held accountable in some way for the money, because Social Security does not have to support the problem they have generated. But now we get to the point about the right to honor. Because these people, this religious confession or sect, to those of you who have said, I no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or to the one who has said, what you are doing is not correct, you can't force anyone not to accept a medical treatment with blood, for example, or, well, all the things that we have seen and that we have already published. We have to ask for this right to honor, and that they respect us because they call us apostates, but not apostate based on the meaning in a dictionary. Jesus also was an apostate when he went apostate from Judaism, no? In this case, we have gone out. In this sense, we could be called apostate. I don't take offense, but I'm offended when they want to call me apostate in a derogatory manner. As my father called me in Arenal Street a few years ago, screaming with a red face, telling me that I was an apostate, as if I were a pig, as if I were the lowliest thing in this life, a person who's going to die in that Armageddon genocide they preach. About my sister, in the year 2000, I commented to a congregation elder that I had suffered child abuse. I mean, when you tell them something, they turn against you. They want to silence you. They want to cover it up. And if it's your relatives, they start yelling at you. And we have seen that here on more than one occasion. There is a victim crying because her own father, her own mother, has done the same thing to her. We have victims here in front of us who have had this same thing done to them. Therefore, this is a common thing to all of us. We are called apostates, so they can mark us. Like when animals are marked. We're marked, as it were, in our foreheads, that we are apostates, and when they see us on the sidewalk, they change to the other sidewalk. If they are relatives, they do not talk to us, and they are very rude about it. That is why we are going to ask for this respect, and we will see in what ways it can come. But not only for us, but also for the other religious confessions, which they call harlots, the great whore. That is the vocabulary of a cult within the Jehovah's Witness religion, which is also something else that denotes a religion when it begins to have terms that only they understand. That's because we are already starting to be a cult, and those terms are sometimes used to separate themselves, to identify themselves, to take a higher position than the rest. Well, who is going to go to a church to his brother's wedding, for example? Your brother is not a witness. He is a Catholic. He's getting married in the church. Well, we can't go to the church because if we do, then we make ourselves exposed to a judicial committee and they might disfellowship us. Freedom of worship exists and we respect that right. We do not want this religious denomination, Jehovah's Witnesses, to disappear. It is not our goal. Our goal is that they respect fundamental human rights as well as the constitutional rights granted by Spain and by all the countries of the world. Our goal is that they not kill us socially. Politicians need to know all this, ministries, social security, because if they were to run the numbers, to compile a small statistical analysis, many times even the doctors, because of the Data Protection Act, are forbidden to ask, what is your religion? But if we could run a poll to see how many are lately seeking mental health, we might find a high rate of growth in all those who have gone through a cult or a religious denomination like this one, which has a very cult-like inclination. Okay, mind control exists and we have to make it very clear. Most of them are young people who are taught from an early age things that are unrealistic. I wanted to grow this beard of mine over 30 years ago, but I couldn't. It was forbidden. We got the ruling on Thursday, and I think it was Friday that they made a worldwide announcement on jw.org broadcasting, and you'll find it on Facebook and social networks, where they explain with very self-serving reasoning that it is now possible for a man to grow a beard. How many people have been put through the stigma for wearing beards in the congregation, have even had to face a judicial committee? They have not been given privileges, so-called privileges. In other words, the exhaustive mind control in their lives is shameful. They have been subjected to excessive control, and this has brought fibromyalgia to many. It has been proven that fibromyalgia, many depressions, chronic health conditions, and depression and anxiety all result. Therefore, we have to demand that they do a study, that they evaluate the official registration of their religion to see if they truly deserve to keep it. Make them pay economically all of this unnecessary expense that the Social Security is facing. And we as an association, we are going to offer ourselves. I don't know if we will have to ask for subsidies because this is going to overwhelm us. I don't know if Social Security is going to want our help, although it is true that we know what the problem is. We know what are the situations that each victim is experiencing. And we know and can explain to psychologists so that they might be able to act. In fact, we have some psychologists prepared not only in cults, but precisely in ours. So we are experienced with all of this, and thus we are proposing the following: a joint action with the ministry for respect for us, to fight for our right to honor and the right of other religions to that same honor, because we have no other choice. In other words, it is not permissible to insult the governments, to insult them the way they do with their divisive vocabulary. But the world in general does not know them well enough to see what's behind it all. There is no smoke without fire. We know what they're after. They want to secure government land grants. And here's an inside story that perhaps no one knows about. But in 2007, there was a Bethelite. Okay, I have this in writing in a letter from him, that he'd come from Barcelona, knocking on the doors of ministries and other offices, and he found one. They won't tell you this, but we tell it here because we have the evidence. They always go around saying that they have never been condemned, but they have been condemned more than once. And this was a big one in 2007, because this man knocked on the door and they listened to him, and the Ministry of Labor went inside the branch in Alvir, Spain, the head office, and it required them to pay Social Security for about 500 workers. And this was applied retroactively back 4 years. They were sanctioned. And the first thing they did was to think about closing the Spain branch and selling it. Their solution was to leave Spain. Then, as the years went by, they saw that they could not sell it. The real estate bust came, that famous 2008 crisis. They couldn't sell. But that was their intention, and in the end they decided to stay, restructure facilities for purposes of translation, and they reduced staff from 500, more or less, to a workforce of about 200 people. People who were special pioneers in many places in Spain. They were people who received 120 euros per month for working as special pioneers, and they were dropped and had to go make a living themselves, earning what they could from the donations they'd get for the publications they placed. I mean, you can imagine that there have been people here who have given all from the heart. That's right, special pioneers were the first that they removed so as not to have to pay Social Security for many who were inside Bethel, who also earn 120 euros per month. That assignment was taken away from them, and they sent them to their congregations to avoid paying Social Security. And now they are still doing strange things, and the ministry should look into them. The Ministry of Labor needs to investigate, because we know that they're doing things like building kingdom halls and other constructions. There are some workers who are registered with Social Security, but others who are not. Or maybe they are introduced there and presented as discharged, and then it turns out that in 1 or 2 months they are taken away and they disappear from the Social Security system, no longer registered. Well, these things will have to be investigated by the ministry, by a job inspector, and it will have to be reviewed. We will also have to communicate these things with the ministries, as we are indicating here. Therefore, there will be more to do, more actions to take. But the main ones are these. We have to get them once and for all to abandon the judicial committee system now in place, period. They have the right to make judicial committees, but make them much softer. And to say publicly to all their faithful, and even in the media, and to publish on their own media and to publish it on their website, that their members can speak to those who are disfellowshipped, that they do not remain as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but that they can speak to them and deal with them socially, that they can still go to the movies, play soccer, or when they're walking down the street and they see one of these disfellowshipped ones, they can stop and talk to them and ask how they are Because to date, the only thing this officially registered religious denomination has achieved is to create divisions between family and friends. At this point, I will turn the microphone over to Carlos, as he has something to tell you on the legal end of things. Good afternoon to all. I had the pleasure of meeting with and interviewing Carlos Bardavillo when I was in Madrid, Spain last summer. At that time, we expected the court to rule on this case within a matter of weeks. Carlos felt they had a solid case and an excellent chance at winning, but I'm sure he never expected the full extent of the win against Jehovah's Witnesses and what it would mean not just for the Association of Victims that he has represented so well, but for all of Spanish society. We'll conclude our coverage with his testimony as he calls for action at the highest level of government to regulate this religion and curb its harmful cult-like practices and policies. I will be very brief because something that has pleased me greatly is the way the media in Spain have succeeded in getting this story out to the public. They have reported exactly what the court's ruling states, that this duly registered religious group is actually a destructive cult. And that is what the sentence declares, the truth that there are victims created by the application of this group's policies, that it is in fact a destructive cult. Why? To explain in legal terms, it is because whoever becomes a member doesn't really know what they are getting into. This is a type of uninformed consent. You have to ask how many homosexuals, for example, there are in Jehovah's Witnesses. A boy witness, a homosexual boy who is baptized at 16 into the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, then 2 years after his baptism, he discovers his homosexuality, he is lost. Because if he confesses it, he is disfellowshipped. If he is disfellowshipped, his family does not speak to him. So he loses his family, he loses his life. Was he informed that he could not engage in homosexual practices and that if he did so, he would be disfellowshipped? This is one of the keys, one of the nuances of which the sentence speaks. But it speaks of so many nuances, speaks of so many problems, a treasure trove of sufferings. So we have to thank the media for being so thoughtful in terms of reporting this judgment, going into the particulars of each victim, like abused women who went to the elders, the religious authorities, and these elders, these authority figures recommended them not to report, to leave it in Jehovah's hands, so as not to stain his good name, because they require witnesses for abuse, for sexual abuse. 2 eyewitnesses are required by them. The court's ruling states categorically that this standard of 2 eyewitnesses for sexual abuse discourages the victim from reporting sexual abuse. Because even when confessing it to the religious authorities or to their own parents, they say to themselves, if I do not have 2 witnesses, I go against Jehovah, because Jehovah requires 2 eyewitnesses. The court's ruling states that this rule discourages the reporting of abuses, and furthermore, the sentence states categorically that all of these problems that are declared in the sentence and which are reported in the media create a problem to which the public authorities, by virtue of Article 39 of the Spanish Constitution, have to intervene to protect the family unit, to protect the family from how they are introduced into a religion without being fully informed. And that is a very important task that the ruling warns about. It also announces that what the victims state is true, and so true that these things constitute crimes, not just psychological problems or family problems. They are denouncing crimes in the procedure itself, that is, public authorities, the public prosecutor, the Attorney General of the state, and political parties have a legal and jurisdictional obligation, because the Spanish Constitution requires intervention and to know in detail what is going on inside Jehovah's Witnesses. Because these people, not only do they suffer from a very serious psychological disorder to the point that many of them statistically commit suicide, but they are also victims of a, shall we say, a large number of behaviors that even the judge herself for the first time says Well, we can't say that they are knowingly engaged in malicious misconduct with the intent to do harm. But yes, at least the judge says they have acted recklessly. Recklessly. The recklessness that the judge speaks of opens the way for future civil and even criminal claims. And I encourage everyone who feels victimized by Jehovah's Witnesses, victimized for any reason or in any legal sense, to come forward and contact the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses to be informed of their rights as a victim. Because the court ruling says more than being clearly declared a victim in the final verdict. One cannot be denied the right to feel victimized and to express and manifest that feeling. Because the dirtiest thing, to put it mildly, is the tactic that Jehovah's Witnesses employ of trying to eliminate the feeling of being a victim and the free expression of that feeling before society. And that is the only thing that the victims are asking for. Many victims have not filed a criminal complaint, they have not filed a civil complaint. But this religious denomination sued the victims, the Association of Victims, because they, according to the communication made by this religious denomination, they wanted to deny these victims their right to feel they had been victimized and to express themselves as victims. And that right, with this ruling, is now determined. They can tell it because it is proportional and it is also truthful. It is within the right to information. And the sentence sets out some constitutive indications, including criminal offenses that have been committed even within the religious confession, and therefore we request the assistance of public authorities, the Public Prosecutor's Office of the Attorney General of the state, and the political parties to defend abused women, battered women, to defend homosexuals, to defend religious freedom of their members, to defend their honor, to defend their honorability, to defend the free development of personality that not only the minors, but also the adults have. This is an issue in which we have, I would say, to investigate beyond religious freedom, how to defend it. It is also a fundamental right, free development of personality, personal dignity, also the right to equality, and of course all the rights that have been vulnerable, such as sexual freedom or the freedom of sexual orientation. Agreed? So thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to hearing any questions you may have. If you would like to contact the Spanish Association of Victims of Jehovah's Witnesses or contact the law office of Carlos Bardavillo, I'll put 2 QR codes on screen at the end of this video, as well as include their URLs in the description of this video. Let us pray for these victims. Thank you for your support.